It's a dance. Dance of death. The danse macabre. Someone's once asked me what I paint. I said, I paint life, right? And it's about struggle and men, okay? I'm known to paint many earth goddesses. I'm now painting man's struggle. And man's struggle is of the warrior. And it's tempered by Zen, which is the monk. So you have an intellect and a body, and you combine both to create a martial art. I remember when I was oh, you want to be an artist? I said, yeah, I want to be an artist or a soldier. So again, even there was that point of the artist and warrior, the priest, warrior, priest, that sort of thing. Why I say priest is, in the old days, Matisse once said art was a priesthood, meaning it wasn't a career. Meaning in those days, when he said it, there are actually decent people that want to devote their life to helping others and doing good, as opposed to careerism, which is going out there and grabbing everything you can. And Robert Hughes' book, The Shock of the New, at the end of his book, he said he saw in North America an awful lot of art as career, but precious little art as vocation. I was offered a lifetime career up in the Arctic. I said, I can't take that. I want to be an artist. Prior to that, a lot of people just around that time or after that were going to the States to get their MFA, because all of a sudden they were starting to create an American, German-style art institution thing in art and universities and what have you. That was coming to pass. And these guys were getting in on the ground floor. And they did. And they became heads of departments in all these places. And I said, no, I want to be an artist. Mind you, I then became the youngest artist ever to teach at the College of Art. And that happened 3 different times, 60s, 70s, and the 80s. And at some point, you got to walk out of that stuff because it's corrupting. The money's too good. And you're busting your ass all your life. And people say, well, my God, you paint rings around all those guys in New York. Why don't you go to New York? I said, I can't do that. I said, I'll be spending all my time trying to make money. Because that's what New York's about, making money. And that's why it's expensive. And the same with London at the time. London was great, but unless you had or were able to find a patron to support you, that wasn't going to happen. Or if you came from private means, right? If your family had private means. But those people never usually amount to being artists anyway. So that's part of the struggle as well. And don't forget, I came along, you know, at a time when, you know, people were making heroes out of a lot of these artists that died young through the struggle. And then, of course, people bought their works, Van Gogh, Gauguin, Modigliani, you know? So one was aware that was part of it. Oscar Wilde once said, there at the head of the stairs stood several members of the Royal Academy disguised as artists. No truer words, you know. I remember being down at the art gallery in some function, and there they were, all those people that had tenure in the various universities standing there, disguised as artists. I've had many collectors over the years, and usually, by and large, they were people that were very good in their own field, and they were very individualistic. They thought for themselves. They were very bright, too. And I would think you would have to be to even look at my work, because otherwise you're going to listen to what the art critics in the papers or art magazines or what have you, where these people that are involved in that game think that they're the elite, enlightening the masses on what to buy or what to look at. Well, that's fascism, the worst kind. In my 20s, I really believed that your contribution, what was the artist's contribution? To elevate the society's consciousness so it can understand itself more and it doesn't fall into these traps that history has shown that societies do. Of course, that's when you're an idealist and you actually think that can do it. And what it did with me is that, as I said to my daughter once, I said, well, our first ancestor came here, he was a radical, and they killed him. Charged him with sedition and treason. And I said, nowadays they only ignore you to death. Respect wasn't for someone with money. Respect was for the man that could handle himself, the warrior, the honest integrity man, not the man that had all the land. You didn't like that guy because that guy didn't get that owning, all that land by any legitimate means possible. People don't. They finagle, they do many heinous things to accumulate that, and usually over people's suffering. So I didn't want anything to do with that. As a young, when I didn't know anything about these things, my gut instinct was to do what I did, be an honest man, and then try and find as much integrity out of what you do as possible. And through life, you meet people. Some were good people, some were good people and died young. Then there were people that sold out and became absolute weasels, And he said, yeah, well, how happy are they, They made lots of money, especially teaching in the universities and the art institutes. That was good money. Maybe not good in relation to Bay Street and brokering or whatever, but certainly good for, from where I'm looking. And it was a paycheck all the time. And no, you had to live a different world where you never know where your next paycheck, where your next money's coming from. So it's always up and down. So that's part of the struggle too. But that's what you paint. After first year, I struggled with the concept of either going into fine art or illustration. And I went into illustration because I was a young kid and people wanted to push me that way. You can make a living, whatever. And I was there about 3 weeks, and I had some of my illustrations on the wall. And then I said, I can't take this anymore. I got to be an artist. I gotta create out of my own. I can't be bothered with doing something for the man, right? And I remember the head of the illustration department chasing me down the hall and saying, "You're going to ruin your life." The struggle is day after day, year after year, coming down and creating a work, not knowing if you'll ever sell it. And that can't be a priority, otherwise you start painting pot boilers. You start painting commercial stuff for the mainstream art world. You start working and thinking in those terms. Well, there are people that think in those terms, but they're commercial artists. And, or the people think that way, they get into minimalism or what have you, because it's a prevailing cultural ethos of, say, North America, or that whole Lacanian neo-Marxist stuff that's in the art world and in the philosophy departments all over the world. Certain works that I see a glimpse of a photograph, that's stapled on a wall somewhere. I said, oh, that's a great work. Where's that? Well, we know where it is. It's in storage of one of my collectors. I haven't seen it since it was left here. And I said, that's a brilliant work, triptych, you know, brilliant work. Then I get angry because a lot of these people, they get them and they put them in storage and they won't be seen for 50 years. And to me, that's an absolute fucking crime against me. So I try not to think of that and just go on to the next one, you know? But that's what I was thinking this morning. But if you dwell on that too much, that's why I do karate, to purge myself of that anger. And justifiable anger, to tell you the truth. Works that you've poured your intellect and everything into, and people get them and store them.
Well, my first impression of Rick was his intensity. Way too intense for what was going on at the time. I liked the intensity, but at the beginning, because he has got so much energy, and that's what you notice about Rick over the years. The energy just does not dissipate. It just keeps on going and going. At first, I was like, wow, this guy's, he's too much. It's really intense. And then after the course of so many years, starting to understand how brilliant the guy is, and he's sort of got it bottled up in his head, and he had so much passion for the karate at that point, it's kind of disconcerting until you really sort of get into who Rick is and you know, sitting down with the guy and discussing him. But now that he's much more educated at the art and really has dedicated himself to it, you can see that that intensity is focused a lot more. And again, if you've ever seen Rick perform his art, like put paint on canvas, you see how he attacks the canvas. So at first, the first little while, I was like, okay, this guy's got something going on.
You know, as when any new person comes, you kind of, you know, you're observing the person and how they behave, and maybe in comparison to other people who had joined the club since I had been there, Rick definitely stood out, I think, to myself and probably other people too, just because when he gets on the floor and begins to train, and you're in the room with him, you can definitely feel his presence. You can hear his presence because he's quite loud with his ki-eyes and with his breathing, the intensity that he kind of exudes. And it was great. It was a challenge because, as I said, he trains so intensely. He takes it to the point where he is, you know, trying to do the techniques properly and do them fully, but without having to hurt you. But because when you're training, sometimes, you know, you can't really control what the other person is doing. There was often the time where he would, you know, punch you in the face, or kick you in the face, or kick you in the groin, or throw you down on the ground and be jumping on top of you and yelling and screaming while he continues to punch you. And prior to Rick coming, those times would happen, but not really on a regular basis. So once you saw Rick do that a couple of times, then when he would come in the door each day for training, you would know that there's a chance that something like that might happen.
The more you do it, the more you're healing your body and your mind. And the more